They humiliated an old couple on a luxury yacht, until Billionaire called Dad vertical bar, emotional echoes. Lick it, if you want to stay. Her voice cut through the music like a knife. On the deck of a billion-dollar yacht, an old woman knelt, trembling before guests in silk and champagne. Her husband in a wheelchair beside her, too weak to speak. No one moved. No one helped. Only the sound of the sea answered their shame. Under the blinding sun of luxury, two parents were humiliated, unaware the empire that crushed them belonged to their own son. What would you have done in his place? Welcome to Emotional Echoes, a channel where emotions come alive, and every story leaves a lasting echo in your heart. Please subscribe to Emotional Echoes. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers so more souls can feel these stories. Stay with my video till the very end and let me know where you're watching from so I can see how far this story spreads. Now, let me tell you what really happened that day on the Golden Pearl. Frank's hand shook when he lifted the cup. The sea breeze brushed across his wrinkled skin, carrying the faint scent of salt and champagne. Around him, the deck of the Golden Pearl gleamed under the Florida sun-white marble floors. Crystal glasses and guests dressed in silk. Waiters glided past with trays of caviar and wine. Jazz played softly from hidden speakers. Frank didn't belong here, and he knew it. But today was special. His son, Ryan Miller, owned this world. Now this yacht, this ocean, this empire, and Frank wanted to see it with his own eyes. Martha stood beside him, steadying his hand. Her floral dress fluttered in the wind, her face bright with quiet pride. She whispered, "Careful now, Frank. The waves are moving." He smiled, nodding, but his fingers trembled. The cup tilted. A stream of hot coffee spilled forward and splashed onto the white leather shoes of a woman nearby. The music stopped. The laughter around them faded. The woman gasped. Linda turned, her eyes sharp as glass. She looked down at the brown stain spreading across her shoes, and then at the trembling old man in the wheelchair. "Do you have any idea what you just did? These shoes cost $12,000. Frank's face went pale. His lips parted, but no words came. "I'm sorry, miss. It was an accident." Linda stepped closer. "Sorry doesn't clean designer leather." Evan, the yacht's manager, appeared immediately. He wore a spotless white uniform and the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "What seems to be the problem here?" Linda pointed down at the stain. "This man thinks he's in a coffee shop." Evan's gaze swept over Frank and Martha, the simple clothes, the worn shoes, the calloused hands. He straightened up. "Sir, Mum, this area is reserved for guests of the CEO. Please, show me your invitation." Martha's voice shook. "Our son invited us. Ryan Miller. He's your boss." Evan's jaw twitched, but his tone stayed cold. "Of course he did. Still, while you're here, please be mindful." He glanced at the floor. "Clean it up. Please." Martha blinked. "You want me to, unless you prefer security to handle it," he said sharply. The surrounding guests watched in silence. Some whispered, others just stared. Martha bent down, her knees stiff. Frank reached out. "Desperate. Please. It was my fault. She doesn't need to." Linda cut in, smirking. "Oh, let her. It'll give her something to do." Martha's hand shook as she tried to wipe the coffee with a napkin. Linda's voice grew louder. "Not like that. Do it properly." She leaned forward, her tone cruel. "Use your tongue. The words hit like a slap. A few guests gasped. Most stayed quiet. Evan looked away. Martha froze, her breath short. She had worked hard her whole life. Cleaned floors, washed linens, cared for others, but never had anyone spoken to her like that. Frank tried to wheel himself forward, his voice cracking. "Stop this." Evan's eyes narrowed. Then she should hurry up. He won't ask again. Martha's head bowed lower. Her hand hovered over the stained shoes. Her reflection wavered in the polished leather. Then a clear voice broke through the silence. "Excuse me. Everyone, we're entering stronger waves. Please take your seats for safety." It was Lily, a young waitress with tired eyes and a soft southern accent. She stepped forward quickly, clipboard in hand, pretending to check safety protocols. Evan frowned. Linda rolled her eyes. Lily reached for Martha's arm. "Ma'am, please sit. It's not safe to stand right now." Martha looked up at her. "Stunned." Lily smiled gently and helped her up. The crowd shifted, murmuring about the weather. Evan muttered something about inconvenience, but backed off. Linda crossed her arms, glaring. "Just keep them out of my sight." Lily guided Martha to a seat near the railing. Frank sat beside her, his hands shaking on the armrests of his wheelchair. The sunlight glimmered off the water, but the air felt heavy. Martha stared down at the deck. The dark stain still spread between them, small. "Ugly. Unforgettable." Frank's voice broke the silence. "I shouldn't have come here." Martha's fingers found his, squeezing gently. She couldn't answer. The jazz resumed. The laughter returned. But it all sounded hollow. Lily passed by again, pretending to adjust a tray of glasses. She whispered without looking at them, "Don't let them take your pride." "Ma'am." Martha blinked away her tears, her lips trembling in gratitude. Far above them, the glittering guests toasted to wealth and beauty. Below that glitter, an old couple sat quietly, holding hands, their dignity bruised but not broken. And somewhere in that vast ocean of arrogance, one young woman had chosen kindness, the only luxury that never went out of style. After the humiliation on the yacht, Martha sat beside Frank, still holding his hand. His fingers twitched slightly, his eyes empty. She wanted to tell him it would be all right, but the words wouldn't come. Her heart drifted backward, far from this ocean of arrogance, back to a small house in Ohio where everything began. There were no marble floors there, no silk dresses or champagne, just cracked walls, warm soup, and the sound of laughter that came from love, not wealth. Frank used to come home in his dusty work boots, smelling like concrete and rain. He worked at a construction site, lifting heavy beams, building homes he could never afford. Martha would wait by the door, still wearing her nurse's uniform from the evening shift, with 3 children running around her legs. Andrew, the oldest, was always serious, pretending to be a doctor even before he was one. Emily, calm and graceful, kept their little world in order. And then there was Ryan, the youngest, wild, with dreams and questions. He'd climb onto his father's lap, tug at his shirt, and ask what the ocean looked like. Frank would smile and say he didn't know. He'd never seen it. But one day, when Ryan was about 10, he said something his mother never forgot. "One day, I'll buy you both the ocean, so you'll never have to work again." Martha had laughed. Then, wiping flour from her hands, she told him he didn't need to buy anything. Just Stay kind. But Ryan's eyes burned with a kind of fire that didn't belong to small towns. He wanted to fix things, to make life easier for everyone he loved. Back then, he was just a boy with second-hand shoes and too much heart. Everything changed the day Frank fell. It was raining, the kind of rain that blinds you. A steel beam came loose. The doctors said he was lucky to survive. But something in him had been broken. His memory came and went. Some days he knew her name. Some days he didn't. Martha went back to work full-time, caring for others while caring for him too. She stopped buying new clothes. She stopped sleeping through the night. But she never complained. The children grew up fast. Andrew studied medicine. Emily entered finance. And Ryan, the dreamer, started fixing computers in their basement. He stayed up late, coding, building something no one understood. Years later, that something became a company, and that company became an empire. Suddenly, the boy who once couldn't afford a bus ticket now owned a fleet of yachts and islands named after luxury. Martha remembered the first time she saw him on television. He wore a suit that fit perfectly, his voice confident, his smile rehearsed. He spoke about innovation and success, but not about home. Still, she was proud. She told everyone at the hospital that her son built a company with his own hands. But at night, when the lights were off, she whispered to Frank that their boy was drifting farther from them every year. Frank would smile weakly and ask, "Did he find the ocean yet?" She never answered, because she didn't know. Then one morning, the phone rang. It was Ryan's assistant. He had planned a surprise, an all-expense trip for his parents to visit the island resort his company now owned, a private yacht, first-class service, every comfort they could dream of. He said he wanted to make up for all the years he'd missed. Martha's heart filled with warmth. Frank smiled and said he wanted to wear his best jacket. She didn't know that the world he had built, the world she had once prayed he would reach, had forgotten how to recognize simple goodness. She didn't know that what began as a gift would become the cruelest test of love. Evan's patience ran out the moment Lily walked away. His jaw tightened as he turned to two crew members and ordered them to take the old couple below deck to verify their information. The tone was cold, mechanical, not a request, but a punishment. Martha tried to protest, saying they had already told him who they were. But he ignored her completely. Frank sat in silence, staring at the deck where the coffee stain had dried, as if that small brown mark had stolen something from his soul. The men pushed his wheelchair through a narrow metal door at the back of the yacht. Music and laughter faded behind them, replaced by the hum of engines and the smell of oil. The bright marble turned into grey steel, the light into shadow. Martha followed, clutching her purse to her chest. Each turn of the hallway seemed to shrink the world around them. When they reached a small storage room, Evan stopped. He gestured to the crew. "Leave them here until I figure out who they really are." His voice dripped with contempt. Then he and Linda walked out, slamming the door behind them. Frank looked around the dim room, confused. His breathing grew shallow. He blinked slowly and whispered, "Where are we?" Martha knelt beside him, brushing his shoulder. "It's all right, dear. Just rest." But his eyes were distant, lost in fog. He reached into his jacket pocket with trembling fingers and pulled out a small, worn photograph. 3 children standing under a Christmas tree. He stared at it for a long time, then looked at her. "What's his name again? The little one. The one who said he'd buy us the ocean." His voice cracked, almost pleading. Martha froze. her heart breaking in silence. "His name is Ryan," she whispered. "Your son." "Remember," he nodded slowly, repeating it under his breath like a prayer. "Ryan, my boy." A few minutes later, the door opened. Linda stepped in, her heels clicking on the metal floor. She crossed her arms, eyes cold. "You two sure know how to cause trouble." Martha stood quickly. "Please. My husband needs his medication. It's in my purse. He's not well." Linda smirked. "Then maybe he shouldn't travel." She turned to leave, but Martha reached for her sleeve. "Please. Just one pill." Linda yanked her arm away. "Don't touch me. You people always want something." She glanced toward Evan, standing outside. "Let them sit here. Maybe they'll learn to behave." The door shut again, locking them in darkness. Frank leaned back in the wheelchair, his breathing uneven. Martha fumbled through her purse with shaking hands, pulling out the small bottle of pills. She placed one in his palm and whispered for him to take it slowly. He obeyed, closing his eyes. For a while, there was only the low hum of the engine and the faint sound of laughter above a world far away, where they no longer belonged. Then came a soft knock. The door creaked open, and Lily slipped inside. She carried a small tray with 2 cups of water and a piece of bread wrapped in napkins. Her voice trembled. "I'm sorry. He can't stay long." Martha stood up, startled. Lily set the tray down on a crate. "You shouldn't be down here. I'll find a way to reach your son." Martha's eyes filled with tears. She tried to speak, but her throat closed. Lily crouched beside Frank. He looked at her, lost but gentle. "Are you Ryan's friend?" She smiled sadly. "Something like that." He nodded, clutching the photo again. "Tell him I'm waiting by the ocean." Lily bit her lip and nodded. As she stood to leave, she didn't notice her staff ID card slipping from her pocket, falling to the floor beside Frank's wheelchair. The silver logo gleamed faintly in the dim light. Miller Voyages. She slipped out as quietly as she came. The room fell silent again, the air thick and heavy. Martha sat beside her husband, holding his hand tightly. Frank looked down at the fallen ID card, his fingers brushing over the shiny logo. His lips moved slowly, whispering the words engraved on it. Miller Voyage. A faint light flickered in his eyes, a memory trying to return. Then he looked at Martha, confused. "Is that ours?" She pressed her forehead against his hand and whispered through her tears. "Yes. Love. It always was." Above them, the music swelled again. Laughter. Clinking glasses. The sound of a world that had forgotten them. Below, in the quiet hum of the engine room, a father remembered his son's name, and a small silver card waited on the floor, holding the thread that would soon pull 2 worlds back together. The morning sun glared off the turquoise water as the golden pearl docked at Miller Paradise. The air smelled of salt and expensive perfume. Martha had barely slept. Frank sat in his wheelchair, quieter than usual, his eyes vacant from exhaustion. Evan appeared at their door with that same false smile. He told them there was a special event by the pool and that Mr. Miller would surely want his parents to join. His tone was sweet, but his eyes said something else. Martha hesitated. She asked if Ryan knew they were coming. Evan laughed softly. "Of course he does. Mom, he loves surprises." Linda appeared behind him, dressed in white linen and sunglasses. She clapped her hands and said it would be lovely to have them mingle with the guests. Martha looked down at her simple dress and nodded reluctantly. Frank whispered that maybe it was best to stay on the yacht. But Martha reminded him that Ryan would be proud to see them. The pool area was a world of mirrors and sunlight. Wealthy guests floated from table to table, sipping champagne, their laughter echoing over the water. Photographers moved through the crowd, snapping pictures of models and businessmen. When Evan wheeled Frank closer, heads turned. A few guests smiled awkwardly. Others whispered. Linda leaned over and whispered loudly that the community outreach program had clearly started early this year. A few people laughed. Martha's face flushed red. She kept her eyes down and gripped Frank's shoulder tightly. Frank's hands shook more than usual. His left leg twitched. He looked around, confused by the noise and the faces staring at him. He whispered to Martha that he couldn't find Ryan. Martha told him to be patient, but her own voice was trembling. Linda brought them 2 glasses of sparkling water and said in her falsely sweet tone that they should toast to success. Frank tried to lift the glass, but it slipped from his hand and shattered on the ground. The sound cut through the chatter. Silence fell for a second. Linda smiled slowly. Careful. Sire, that glass probably cost more than your house. Martha bent down to pick up the shards, but Evan stopped her. No need. Our staff will handle it. He leaned toward the crowd and said with a smirk that not everyone could handle fine dining. People laughed again. Martha's face burned. Frank looked at his shaking hands and whispered that maybe they should leave. But Evan placed a firm hand on the wheelchair. Oh no. Sire, the best view is by the pool. Let me show you. He pushed the chair forward, faster than he should have. Martha followed behind, calling for him to slow down. The sound of water splashing mixed with laughter. Frank tried to grab the wheel, saying he didn't feel safe. Evan bent down, pretending to adjust the brakes, but his voice dropped low. Maybe you should learn to stay out of places you don't belong. Then, with a small shove, he tilted the chair toward the pool. The sound of metal hitting water was sharp and final. Gasps filled the air. Martha screamed her husband's name. The crowd froze. For a moment, no one moved. Then bubbles rose to the surface. Frank's arms thrashed weakly beneath the water. Martha ran to the edge, shouting for help. My husband, he can't swim, someone help him. Lily, who had been serving drinks nearby, dropped her tray and dove straight into the water. Her body cut through the reflection of sunlight and panic. She reached Frank's chair, unbuckled the strap, and pulled him upward with all her strength. The crowd stepped back, afraid to get wet, their polished shoes safe on dry marble. Evan cursed under his breath, pretending to call for help. Linda knelt beside Martha, pretending concern but whispering cruelly that accidents happen when poor people pretend to be rich. When Lily brought Frank to the edge, he was gasping, coughing water. Martha fell to her knees, holding his face in her hands. He couldn't breathe. She fumbled through her purse, shouting that he needed his medicine. Linda spotted the bottle, snatched it up, and held it between 2 fingers. She smirked. Looking for this, Martha screamed for her to give it back. Linda shrugged, then tossed it into the pool. The small white bottle hit the water and sank. Martha's cry tore through the air. The guests stood frozen, some whispering, some filming with their phones. Frank began shaking violently, his chest rising and falling unevenly. Lily screamed for an ambulance, pressing on his chest, trying to help him breathe. Martha sobbed, her hands trembling as she tried to hold him still. The sun burned overhead, The sound of water slapping against the marble, echoing like heartbeats. Evan stepped back, pale, now, realizing this had gone too far. The laughter was gone. Only chaos remained. Lily shouted for oxygen, for help, for anyone to call the medical team. Martha held Frank's face close, crying that she shouldn't have brought him here. He coughed once, eyes rolling back. People gasped. A waiter ran for help. And then a voice cut through the noise, deep, angry, disbelieving. What the hell is going on here? Heads turned. Standing at the top of the stairs, in his tailored suit and stunned silence, was Ryan Miller. His eyes locked on the scene below, his mother kneeling in tears. His father sinking back into the pool, his staff frozen in guilt. For a moment, time stopped. The cameras flashed once, catching his face just as the horror set in. The world seemed to stop when Ryan saw the man in the pool. His breath caught as he recognized the fragile body, the familiar gray hair. It was his father. Without thinking, he sprinted forward, tearing off his jacket, diving straight into the water. The shock of cold barely registered. He reached his father's sinking frame, pulled him up, and dragged him to the edge while gasps rippled through the crowd. Martha's trembling hands reached out as Ryan lifted Frank onto the marble floor. His father's face was pale, lips blue, chest barely moving. Ryan pressed his ear to his chest, shouting for help. His voice cracked, raw and terrified. A medic team finally rushed in. They began chest compressions while Ryan turned toward the silent crowd, eyes blazing. Who did this? His voice cut through the air like a blade. No one answered. Evan stood frozen, drenched in sweat. Linda tried to shrink behind a table, her face drained of color. Ryan's gaze locked on them. He stepped closer, water dripping from his sleeves. You. His voice dropped lower, almost shaking. You let this happen. Avon stammered it, saying it was an accident, that they didn't know who the couple was. Ryan's hand clenched, his fury barely contained. You didn't know that's your excuse for cruelty, for humiliation, for throwing away a man's dignity because of his clothes. Linda tried to speak, but her words faltered under the weight of the silence. Martha, kneeling beside Frank, called softly to her son. Ryan, please, stop. He turned to her, eyes burning. They hurt him. Mom, they almost killed him. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Don't destroy others out of anger. Revenge won't heal your father. He stared at her, torn between rage and pain. Then kneeled beside her, taking her shaking hand. Frank gasped suddenly, coughing up water. Martha sobbed in relief as the medics placed an oxygen mask over his face. Ryan's shoulders slumped, his voice breaking. It's okay. Dad, I'm here. His father's hand twitched weakly, brushing against his son's wrist before falling limp again. The medics lifted him onto a stretcher. Ryan followed them as they carried Frank toward the waiting helicopter. The sound of blades cutting the air drowned out the murmurs of the guests. Evan tried to approach, saying he was sorry, but Ryan turned on him, his voice like thunder. You're fired, both of you, effective immediately. Evan's mouth opened to protest, but the look in Ryan's eyes silenced him. Ryan stepped closer, his voice steady now. Cold. Get off my island, and pray my father lives. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The silence around him said everything. As the helicopter lifted off, Ryan stood motionless, watching it fade into the horizon. Martha stood beside him, her hand clutching his arm, whispering prayers under her breath. The sunlight reflected off the pool where his father had nearly died, turning the surface red and gold, like a wound pretending to heal. Ryan's heart felt heavier than the ocean around them. Hours later, in the sterile quiet of the hospital, Andrew and Emily arrived. They didn't hug him. Andrew's voice was calm but cold. "You built a world so high, Ryan. Even your own parents couldn't reach it." Emily's eyes glistened. "They came to see you, not your empire." Ryan had no answer. He stood by the window, staring at the faint outline of the sea in the distance. The same sea his father had dreamed of seeing. The same one that almost took him away. For the first time in years, Ryan Miller felt small. Not as a CEO, not as a billionaire, but as a son who forgot what mattered most. And as the night fell over the hospital, the weight of that truth crushed the silence between them. Frank lay motionless beneath the pale hospital lights, the sound of the heart monitor echoing like a slow, uneven clock. Each beep felt like it measured Ryan's guilt more than his father's pulse. He sat by the bed, elbows on his knees, his face buried in his hands. Martha sat across from him, her eyes hollow from crying, but her voice was calm in that steady, maternal way that always came when pain grew too deep for panic. After a long silence, she reached into her purse and pulled out an old, folded envelope. The paper was yellowed and soft from age. She placed it on his lap and whispered that Frank wrote it years ago. "After the construction accident, he wanted you to have it," she said, when words became too hard for him to say. Ryan stared at the letter for a long time before unfolding it. The handwriting was shaky. The ink faded, but it carried the weight of love that had survived everything. He began to read. "If someday I forget my name, I hope you remember who you are. Remember that we came from nothing but love, and that kindness is worth more than any fortune. Never let success make you forget what it means to be human. The world will tell you money gives you power, but compassion gives you purpose." The words blurred as tears filled Ryan's eyes. He pressed the letter to his chest, his breath breaking apart. The air in the room felt heavy. "Sacred," he whispered to himself. He realized he had learned to build ships, but forgotten how to be a son. All the years of boardrooms, press headlines, and success melted away, until all that was left was a boy kneeling beside the man who taught him to dream. He had chased oceans, but somehow drowned in his own pride. Martha reached across the bed and touched his shoulder. Her voice trembled. "Your father never blamed you, Ryan. He was proud of you, even when you forgot where you came from." Ryan shook his head, tears falling freely now. "I built a world where he didn't belong. Mom, I thought I was giving him everything, but I took away what mattered most time." She looked at him, her face soft with forgiveness. "Then give it back," she said quietly. "Maybe not to him, but to the world he built you for." That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. The letter lay open beside him, and he read it over and over until the words carved themselves into his chest. By dawn, the decision was clear. When the sun rose over the city, the media had already gathered outside the hospital. Cameras lined the steps, reporters shouting questions about the incident on Miller Paradise. Ryan stepped before them, wearing a simple grey suit. Notier, no smile. The flash of cameras didn't faze him. He raised his hand for silence and began to speak not as a CEO, but as a son He admitted that somewhere along the way, Miller Voyages lost its soul. It stopped being a dream of joy and became a mirror of greed. His voice cracked slightly, but he didn't hide it. He promised change, real, human change. From that day on, Miller Voyages would no longer serve luxury, but humanity. He spoke about his father, a man who built homes for strangers and taught him that dignity was not a privilege. He announced new programs that would open his resorts and yachts to nurses, teachers, construction workers, people like his parents. He paused for a long moment, his eyes scanning the crowd. And then he saw her. Martha stood quietly at the back, her hospital wristband still visible beneath her sleeve. Their eyes met, and for a moment the world disappeared. She smiled faintly, tears glistening in the morning light, as if to say she had heard what she needed to. Ryan's voice softened when he spoke again. As for those who failed us, he said, referring to Evan and Linda, they will not be erased, but redeemed. They will work to rebuild what they broke: trust, humility, compassion. Redemption should never be easy, but it should always be possible. The crowd fell silent. For the first time in his life, Ryan didn't feel like he was performing. He felt like he was home. When he stepped down from the podium, reporters shouted his name, but he didn't look back. He turned toward the hospital entrance, where Martha waited. She opened her arms, and he walked straight into them. No words, no apologies, just the kind of silence that heals. Behind them, the morning sun poured through the glass doors, touching the crumpled letter still held in his hand. That letter had once been a message from a father who feared forgetting himself. Now, it was a reminder for a son who had finally remembered. A year later, the island that once shimmered with pride and luxury had changed. Miller Paradise was gone. In its place stood Haven of Hearts, a retreat built not for billionaires, but for the people who carried the world on their shoulders. The marble floors were still there, but now they bore the footsteps of nurses on vacation, teachers holding their first cup of coffee in peace, and construction workers sitting by the ocean they helped others reach. The place breathed warmth instead of wealth. Lily walked across the open courtyard, clipboard in hand, smiling as a group of retired firefighters waved at her. She was no longer just a waitress. She was the operations manager now, trusted, respected, and deeply kind. Every morning, she greeted guests by name and reminded them that this place was theirs too. Her gentle leadership shaped the island's soul, humble, compassionate, and full of laughter. Evan and Linda were there too. The same people who once ruled with arrogance now wore plain uniforms, serving food and cleaning tables. But there was no bitterness in their faces anymore. Evan knelt beside an elderly guest in a wheelchair, tying his shoe without a word. Linda helped a young single mother carry her bags to the bungalow, pausing to play with her toddler. They worked hard, not to impress anyone, but to make things right. When Lily passed by, they nodded respectfully. It wasn't forgiveness she gave them, but trust rebuilt one act of kindness at a time. At sunset, the air smelled of salt and grilled food. Families gathered on the beach around bonfires, laughing freely. Music played softly, not from a band, but from a guest strumming an old guitar. Ryan often joined them, sitting quietly on the sand, watching strangers connect in ways money could never buy. He didn't talk about business anymore. He listened. He learned. He found peace in the simple sound of waves and gratitude in the people he once overlooked. One afternoon, a small boat approached the dock. Martha stepped out first, followed by Frank in his wheelchair, his movements slow but steady. Ryan walked down to greet them. His mother hugged him, whispering that the island felt alive. Frank looked around, eyes wide, taking in the laughter, the smell of food, and the sight of workers and guests sharing tables without barriers. Ryan pushed his father's chair toward the water's edge. They sat there quietly, watching the sun sink into the ocean. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Frank turned to him and smiled. "You built something beautiful." "Son." Ryan's voice cracked as he answered, "You built me first." "Dad." Martha wiped her eyes, pretending the wind had made them water. Behind them, the sky burned orange and gold. The sound of children laughing carried through the evening air. Haven of Hearts stood not as a monument to success, but as proof that redemption could bloom even from pain. The sea was calm that evening, the kind of quiet that carried peace instead of emptiness. Ryan pushed his father's wheelchair slowly down the wooden pier. The planks creaked beneath their weight, and the fading sunlight painted everything in gold. Martha walked beside them, her hand resting lightly on the back of Frank's chair. The air smelled of salt and warm pine from the island trees. In the distance, Lily stood near the shore, smiling softly as she watched them. Frank's head tilted toward the horizon, his eyes half closed, but filled with thought. He spoke slowly, each word carried by the rhythm of the waves. "Funny," he said. "I forget faces these days, even my own sometimes. But I remember teaching you how to tie a rope." He gave a small laugh, the sound thin but full of life. "I made you practice until your hands hurt. Didn't I?" Ryan smiled, his eyes wet. "You did, Dad, and I'll never forget who taught me what truly matters." They stopped at the end of the pier where the ocean opened wide before them. The sun touched the water, turning it into liquid fire. Frank reached out his hand. Ryan took it, feeling the weakness, but also the warmth that had never changed. Martha leaned close, whispering that it was almost time for dinner. But her voice trembled, as if afraid to break the moment. Frank smiled faintly. "The sea remembers everything," he said. "The storms, the calm, the hands that built the boats. Maybe that's why I like it. It forgets nothing." Ryan looked out over the horizon, his voice low and steady. "Maybe that's what love is too. It remembers, even when we don't." The wind brushed past them, gentle and kind. Behind them, laughter from the island carried through the air workers and guests, sharing stories. The sound of plates clinking, the melody of a guitar. It was life, simple and good, exactly as it was meant to be. Frank sat quietly, his hand still in Ryan's, his eyes on the endless line where sea met sky. For the first time in a long time, Ryan didn't feel the weight of guilt, only gratitude. The narrator's voice softened, like a friend leaning closer to share one last secret. Sometimes, the richest man isn't the one who owns the yacht, but the one who remembers who built it. Wealth fades, fame disappears, but love is the only luxury that never does. If this story touched your heart, share it. Leave a comment about someone who taught you what truly matters. And if you believe love is still the strongest thing in this world, subscribe to Emotional Echoes for more stories like this one. Thanks for listening.